Hello, thank you for being here. Welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and in this week's video, I wanted to share with you the method that I use to very quickly get my camera's exposure using all manual settings. So I want this to be short and sweet, so let's just get right to it. Now, I do believe there's a difference between taking a photograph and creating one, and the first step to creating a photograph is taking control of your camera's manual settings. So let's get that camera out of auto mode. Now, before we jump into the method itself, we should do a quick once over on the three parts of actually getting an exposure. Those things being f-stop, also known as aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Starting with f-stop, this is the first of two mechanical mechanisms that result in your exposure. Every lens has an aperture that consists of a number of blades that open and close. The smaller the opening, the lesser amount of light that gets through, and the bigger it opens, the more and more light that gets through. The shutter is the second part of the mechanism that essentially acts like a door opening and closing. The longer the door is open, the more light it lets in. It's the f-stop and shutter speed that ultimately decide how much light is being let inside to the sensor and how long it stays there to make an exposure. The last part of the exposure triangle is ISO or ISO, and this just determines the gain or brightness of the exposure. The higher the ISO, the more sensitive the sensor will behave with the light that comes in. The method I use utilizes three available tools on my camera, and I believe at least two of these features should still be available on most all cameras these days. These tools are Live View, the exposure meter, and the histogram. Depending on your camera model and manufacturer, you may need to refer to your camera manual to get all of these to show up at the same time. Okay, so for any situation that I'm in, whether I'm shooting a kid's birthday party or I'm at a wedding, the very first thing I'm going to do to get my exposure is I'm going to turn on my Live View. From here, I get a live view of the actual scene. I can see my histogram here, which doesn't have any data on it because of the settings that I had last. And then this blinking here happening is my actual exposure meter as well. So you can see it goes plus to minus with a 0 in the middle. So the last time I used my camera, I was outside, so it's all set for a bright sunny day. But now we're inside, we have some tungsten lighting, and it's not very bright. And we can't see anything on the screen at all. Normally the first thing I would do is change my white balance, but because we can't see anything at all on the screen, we're gonna have to get the exposure in the ballpark before we see any color at all. First thing I'm gonna adjust is my shutter speed. Right now it is very fast, set for outside. Since we're indoors, we're gonna knock this down to 1/125th. Now, since it was bright outside, I was shooting at a 2.8. Normally I like to shoot a little more wide open, so I'm gonna take that down to 2.0. And then the next thing is my ISO. Now, as you can see, we're starting to get a little picture on the screen, but we're also starting to get a little more data in the histogram and the exposure meter. Now that we've got a picture on the screen, we can see that the color is way off as well. So now I'll go ahead and adjust the white balance. Since we're inside, I'm going to change this to tungsten. And that's it. For me, I'm happy with this exposure. I've got data on my histogram. My exposure meter is acceptable here. So we'll go and take a shot. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn off Live View, and we're gonna change up the lighting situation in this same room. So let's go ahead and turn on Live View. Just looking at it, it looks overexposed. You can see the exposure meter is reading above 0 now, closer to the plus sign. Even though the histogram doesn't really indicate that there's a lot of data that's in the overexposed part, you can still see there is a tiny bit of data bumping up against this right wall here that is reading as overexposed. And the color is off. So the very first thing I'm going to do is adjust the white balance to daylight. And in this case, I don't mind my shutter speed being at 1/25th. I don't mind my aperture being at f2. But if I want a cleaner image, I might take my ISO down first. So I'm going to start dropping that down until I get into an acceptable range. Right about here looks good. I don't have anything bumping up against this right wall of the histogram, and my exposure meter is reading about a stop under. Now, I'm just looking at Superman's face here, and that's really what I'm exposing for. Everything there looks good. I could probably take it down just another touch. And that I am happy with. So take a shot. All right, let's find one more situation. So the first thing we're going to do is turn on our live view. As you can see, it's completely blown out. Our exposure meter is completely maxed out here, and our histogram, all of our data is now on the right side, and everything is clipping up against this right wall. So the very first thing I'm going to do is change the white balance to cloudy, since it is a cloudy day. Next, we're going to drop our ISO down to the base level, which for my camera is 200. And last, I'm going to take our shutter speed and start moving that a little bit faster until we get all of the clip data off of that wall there on the right. Now, even though my exposure meter says we're a little overexposed, and you can see this spike on the right side, all of that's just sky, and that's not data that I necessarily need. I'm more concentrated on his face. Now, I'll be able to bring that up later, but for me, this is a good exposure. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot. All right, that's it. That's the whole thing. You've got live view, your exposure meter, and your histogram. Your live view gives you a real-time preview of everything that's going on, and your histogram and your exposure meter both give you data readouts to make sure you're not losing data on the left or right. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please click that thumbs up button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.